Welcome back. The Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation is speaking out against this week's riots and violence. So for more reaction, I'm joined now by Annah Moyo, an advocacy officer for the Center. Anna, thank you so much for your time this evening. I mean, various suppositions and reasoning has been presented for, the reason why South Africa saw itself in this conundrum that we were met with this past week. Others saying that it was a political agenda and there was intelligence behind it and criminal elements, whilst others are saying this is indicative of just how divided the country actually is. What say you?
Thank you, Faith. What we have been saying at the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation is proven by some of the research that we have done over the years on why, for instance, is South Africa violent on the one hand, and secondly, why is violence the language that we see on the street when there are frustrations or when, for instance, people do not get their way on certain things. So when we start to unpack some of those issues, that's when we can really begin to deal with the problem, even the kind of violence that we saw in the past few days in South Africa. We have always spoken about the need to look at the key drivers of violence in South Africa. Yes, the violence may have been sparked, for instance, by the arrest of former President Zuma, but the issues really are the same and have been the same over the years when we see violent protests or protesting becoming violent at a later stage. The real issues or the root causes really are your socioeconomic issues that have been compounded in the country by COVID-19. So issues of structural inequality in South Africa are really rife and are at the root cause of the kind of violence that we see in South Africa. Issues of poverty, issues of lack of service delivery, for instance, these have fueled the frustrations and the anger in the lives of many South Africans who really exist and continue to live on the margins, on the periphery of society. These are people who've been hugely affected as well by COVID-19. The national lockdown level 4, for instance, the COVID-19 implications or impacts, for instance, have rendered many jobless, have rendered many unemployed, many small businesses have been closed. So it becomes very easy to galvanize and mobilize people who really are so desperate because of the situation they find themselves in, and also because of some of the structural issues, for instance, that continue to marginalize them. It's easy to mobilize them and to galvanize them towards violence, for instance. So we can speak about criminality, we can speak about the third force, we can speak about the coordination that came with this wave of violence that we saw over the past few days. But what really makes it easy are your root causes. And this is what we need to address as a nation. Unless we address the root causes of violence in South Africa, whatever reactions, whatever responses that are more criminal justice inclined will continue to be akin to really bandaging a wound that is festering instead of actually dealing with the wound, cleaning it up and ensuring that it starts the healing process. So we continue to deal with the symptoms of a much bigger problem, an underlying problem. We need to deal with the issues, the root causes of this kind of violence. When we simply arrest people, we arrest people and we'll continue to see this kind of violence cropping up at a later stage. It does not matter what would have sparked the violence, but what really matters is where we are as a nation, what has informed the psyche of us as a nation to really react so badly to issues to such an extent that we gravitate towards violence as opposed to more peaceful ways of engaging and also dealing with issues.
So in light of how the SANDF has responded to this, I mean, they were deployed, and you as well as an advocacy group, you've expressed your concern about the deployment of the South African National Defence Force. In hindsight, as you look at how calm is being restored in many parts of the country, and those parts that are affected in Gauteng, some parts of KZN as well, in hindsight, do you think the deployment of the SANDF was a good idea or a bad idea?
Thank you, Faith. What we have highlighted, for instance, and previously even with COVID-19, was the fact that in most instances when the SANDF is deployed, it's usually, the deployment is not usually accompanied by training on a human rights-based approach to controlling the crowds, for instance. That has been our main concern, that deploying the army may actually lead to more human rights abuses. It may lead to more violence, as we have seen previously, because of this lack of training. However, we have seen that also the deployment of the army has really provided assistance to the police, providing support to what the police have been doing, and it has actually resulted in the calm. But what we will be calling for instance, even going forward, is that the army also receives a human rights-based approach to dealing with the crowds, the training that they usually are not afforded to in terms of their mandate and the work that they do. So there is a need really to build this training to the police so that their presence in communities leads to peace as opposed to more violence because of the nature of their training and the work and the mandate that they do.
All right, Anna, we're going to have to leave it there for this evening. Thank you so much for your insights. Annah Moyo, Advocacy Officer there with the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation.